Hello everybody, this is the Donkey from Screaming Donkey Woodwork, and today I'm going to show you how I built the Cthulhu table. But first I want to tell you a little bit about me and what I'm doing here. I am not a YouTuber and I'm barely a woodworker. But a few years ago my wife asked me to make her a dining table to keep me from destroying the house with home renovation projects. And I saw Black Forest and Blacktail making these great epoxy tables and I figured, how hard can that be? And the absolute worst possible thing happened. Like a gambler who walks into a casino and hits the jackpot on the first pull, my first table turned out pretty good. Just like that, I was instantly hooked and I knew that this was going to become my new hobby. If you're wondering what happened to my last hobby, well, we moved to a house on a big curve, and if I would have done my old hobby there, people probably would have crashed and not survived. Plus, I've found that giant flamethrowers make the neighbors nervous. So from then on, I was like, well, I guess I make things out of wood and epoxy now. And what started off as the traditional Blue River blue epoxy table, then the black walnut black epoxy table, turned into this weird obsession to see how weird I could get with the wood. Over 11 million people have seen me make a table full of pickles. And it wasn't on YouTube because I am proud to say I am a 45-year-old TikToker. So why am I jumping back into YouTube now? I have had the weirdest idea for a table and now it's going to come to fruition. And I wanted to share it across all social media platforms. So I'm on a bit of a journey to get monetized by YouTube. I got enough followers on YouTube after my first day of asking people on TikTok to follow me on YouTube. Unfortunately, though, I need 4,000 watch hours, and my videos are usually just over a minute long. So if you want a chance to win an awesome giveaway table, watch this to the end. If you like what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button. And anybody subscribed to my channel, when I hit that magic number of 4,000 watch hours, will be automatically entered to win a table that I probably would value at about $6,000. And if you think this Cthulhu table is cool, you ain't seen nothing yet, because the next one I do will be the best table I have ever made, if I do it right. Otherwise, it'll just be a piece of garbage that will end up in a dumpster. So enough plugs, and let's get to the commentary. Now, you may notice that I make my molds a little bit different than everyone else. I use polyethylene, and you might see that with Black Forest, they use it just for their table, but I also use it for my sidewalls. I use hot glue, and I glue it down to the table, but that's only a structural glue up. The real sealing comes from that thick layer of silicone that you see me putting around the edges. And funny enough, I've gotten popular enough to where I have some pro friends now, and any pro friends who see how I make my molds say, that is ridiculous and it won't hold up, but I rarely have leaks, and anytime I have had a leak, it's because I didn't let the silicone cure for at least 24 hours. It's not 22 hours, 21 hours, it's at least 24. And here is the secret last step to my mold making process. This is tabletop epoxy, and I use pretty much exclusively Wise Bond epoxy. That first pour is only a 1/4 inch thick and seals up any potential holes I may have missed in my mold making process. So if I do get a leak, it's going to be tiny, but not only that, it glues my slab down to my table. So then when I do my deep pour, I don't have to worry about my slab floating away. If you're a DIYer, it is not worth buying the polyethylene to do this. It's too expensive. I would definitely buy melamine if I was only making 1 or 2 tables. But at 3, you start to get a discount because you don't have to throw that melamine away, and that's about what it costs, about the same as 3 sheets of melamine. And these strips have lasted me through about 50 tables, and they probably got a few hundred more left in them. So here we're using our Wise Bond deep pour epoxy, and the reason I use Wise Bond is because it is the hardest and the clearest. There are many decent brands of epoxy, well, not many, there's a few decent brands of epoxy out there, but if you're gonna make a $4,000 table, why not use the best epoxy? And this is the moment I started to fall in love with this, and we get one of those great shots where you get to pop the bubbles with the torch here coming up. Really, I don't get to do that all that much because a lot of the epoxy I pour is clear, but here's some bubble popping for you. Really, with a good deep pour, that popping is completely unnecessary because those bubbles will pop on their own. And plus, we have mica pigment in this, and even if they didn't all pop, it would mask them very well. The only thing I would say is to run a paintbrush along the inside to get any bubbles that are stuck to the wood off of that. That will help out a little bit with what your final appearance looks like. Here we're just using the Jello shooter syringe to spread some of that epoxy around into some of these deeper voids. You notice I'm not filling it all the way up to the top because shortly here we're going to come back with some clear and pour it right over the top of everything. So this is just for the camera swirling. This does absolutely nothing swirling it now. You have to wait until it's been at least 24 hours to start swirling your epoxy. And I would say don't swirl it, write in it like you're writing gibberish, and the pattern will come out so much better. And now finally we're mixing up our last layer, and that is a clear layer of epoxy, and we're going to go ahead and mix this up, and this time we're going to degas it. If you're paying close attention, you'll notice there's 2 cups that are inside the table, and I kept trying to figure out a way to weigh those down because I wanted to leave 2 voids in the table, and I figured it out just as I was mixing up my epoxy. And I asked my wife to bring me a Coke. So she brought me 2 because sugar is the slow killer, and she is slowly trying to kill me. But I thwarted her effort by using the Coke cans to weigh down the cups inside the table to create our void. And I threw it in the degasser, which is just a vacuum chamber. Don't leave the mixing stick in there. That was just stupid, and it makes it take longer to degas. So it's not really necessary to degas every deep pour epoxy, especially Wisebond, but I am so used to doing it, I'm going to continue to do it. I always have good results when I do it, but I know plenty of people who do it without degassing, and their stuff turns out just fine. At this point, it's paranoia, and I'm going to do it just for that reason. I figure if you don't mix a whole lot of air in, would probably help it release all the bubbles after your pour. Just remember that not all epoxies are equal, and some you got to degas with, and here we're going to let the air back in. It's always a nice little hissing sound.
3, 2, 1.
The bubbles didn't disappear, they just shrank back down. That vacuum chamber allowed the bubbles to expand so they would rise to the surface, and then when we let the air back in, they all shrink back down to itty bitty, but we get 99% of them out. You'll see that I'm pouring down that paint stick, and the reason you do that is the same reason you pour a beer down the side of the glass if you don't want a bunch of foam in the glass. It limits the amount of air that you're pushing back into the epoxy. So there is a perfect time to pour this clear epoxy, and that is when your first pour of deep pour is tacky still. You don't want it to be completely firm. You want it to be to where you can kind of stick and see your fingerprint in there. Now this will ensure that you get a good chemical bond between both epoxies, and they'll actually be bonded together. If you pour it a little bit earlier, you actually get this cool little ripple effect on the epoxy. So usually I time that one out because I have the exact temperature set in my shop all the time. But if you need to test it, it's when your epoxy is about the consistency of toothpaste. And that is also the last time when you should do your last swirl, is when it's about the consistency of toothpaste. Now this epoxy poured a little bit foggy, and I had been noticing this for a few weeks, that every pour that I was doing was just a little bit foggy. It was concerning, but I didn't panic, and in the end I did figure out what it was, and basically I was just leaving my epoxy in front of my air conditioning unit, and it was getting a little cold, and then it was heating back up. So when it did cure, it cured crystal clear, as you'll see in a second here, and then we popped it out of the mold. Shit. Well, hopefully when we turn it. I forgot about that. That part is so completely satisfying. I love the way that sounds, and I wanted you to be able to hear it firsthand too. Now this part does not sound satisfying at all, and you definitely want to be wearing hearing protection around the CNC machine. Now I know I will say a bunch of times, this is not a job, this is a hobby. And you're going to be like, oh yeah, sure, it's a hobby. You got that nice big old CNC there. Well, this is just a step above a hobby of CNC. It's an Avid CNC. It cost me about $12,000, and it was a whole lot cheaper than all the other tools that it ended up replacing. I don't have a cabinet shop around me that's willing to sell some time on their equipment, so this is my way of flattening my oversized drum sander, and not to mention my jointer all in one. So you can see here that I'm starting to flatten out everything and kind of have to go back and forth behind the table. And what I'm doing there is I am resetting the VFD because I'm pushing it too hard and stopping the motor a bunch of times. For me, that first pass is always the doozy because you're establishing, a nice flat surface for everything to cut across afterwards. So if I go a little bit aggressive here, then I can go right into a pattern cut and I don't have to sit there and babysit the equipment. I mean, I still do because it's a CNC and it's super cool to watch. I get drawn into it like it hypnotizes me. Same thing with degassing too. I always find myself just kind of standing there staring at it. And you may notice I mentioned my wife earlier. She's always with me on lives, really just standing there making fun of me the whole time. But we call her Mrs. the Donkey. And that's because we're very creative and we can come up with unique and original names. And you may hear me mention Barracuda from time to time, and that is Becca Barracuda. I'm actually Dan, so I go by the Donkey on TikTok, so that's what everybody knows me by. I don't mind if you call me either. You call me Danny, you call me the Donkey, you can call me Donkey. I'm cool with all of those. But Barracuda Becca is our associate woodworker, and she helps me do pretty much everything in the shop. So after I got it good and flat, I wanted to go ahead and cut it down to size because I was going to have to make some cuts on the CNC, and I needed nice square reference endpoints for it. Thankfully, with this cut here, we took off the area where I forgot to pour epoxy, and it was null and void. I didn't have to go back and turn the table on its side and re-pour it, which I was worried about the whole time. And this is the last time I used my Evolution track saw. So if you're looking for an entry-level track saw, I cannot recommend this one high enough. So the next step is putting Cthulhu in the table, and I'm going to let my narrator from TikTok tell the story.
Hello everybody, so for the first time ever I commissioned an artist. And this is specifically for the Cthulhu table. So I'm not a terrible digital artist, but I really wanted something special this time around, and I thought it was a little bit more than I could handle. So the work that you see being drawn now is by Call Me Day. So the idea behind this is that we're going to make a blood red epoxy and walnut table, and then carve this into it in black. That's about all I'm going to do, but I'm going to leave a little bit of mystery to this one because I wanted to sneak up on everyone. I gave a little bit of a hint of it the other day where I said that the pickle table that I'm working on now is a little bit of practice for the Cthulhu table. And this right here is what we're starting with for the base for the Cthulhu table. I'm excited. Are you excited? I've got a lot of cool tables in the pipeline right now, and I'm super excited for what this year is going to bring us. And hopefully I can do justice to just a few of these. We're going to be burning a bunch of wood. We're going to be putting some fingers in some wood and an eyeball and a tongue, I think. And we're going to make a Japanese heated table. And we're going to be making some super chunky legs coming up here soon. Oh, and let's not forget the banana table. If I forget the banana table, somebody will remind me every 5 minutes. The point here being, we're going to get real weird with wood. So stay tuned.
So I actually hire all my artists on a royalty basis and usually give them a 2-table advance or promise them that it'll be at least 2 tables. I know when it's going to happen and when it's not, and even so, I'll probably honor it on that anyway. And we go through that, and actually, he just met his 2-table advance, and then he gets $5 per t-shirt that we sell. And every time that hits $100, I will send it to the artist. And I'm just about to cut Call Me Day his first check. I'm guessing he's going to be surprised because, I talked to him the once, send him the 250 advance, send him the second 250, and he's probably thinking he's never going to hear from me again. But we've sold a few of these. Hopefully we'll sell a few more because I would love to cut him a check for $2,000. So for any of the woodworking geeks out there interested what kind of bits I'm using, the first bit that I used was a 1/4 inch. The second bit that I use is a 60-degree V bit. And if you see the lines in the top of the table there, those are from the flattening, and really they're flat, but you get lines on them kind of like when you mow the grass. The particles on the top push opposite directions. So it's still flat, but it looks like it's not, but it is completely flat. After we got Cthulhu all put in, there was still some voids there and a lot of bed heads show up. What the hell's going on with my hair? So I finished filling in all the little holes with CA glue, and I cannot stop looking at my hair. I look completely deranged. I must have like rolled right out of bed before. It looks like it's daylight, so I probably just rolled right out of bed and started making this video. So what I should be saying here is that I mixed up some tabletop epoxy and we used it to fill in the top of the table. But that's not what happened at all. I mixed up some deep pour epoxy because I was out of tabletop epoxy. As always, I blame someone else, so thanks a lot, Rod. But those cup holders were the right size to hold it, and it made me think, man, I should make like every coffee table for myself with like cup holders built into it. After 4 or 5 days, it was good enough to sand it flat. I got that 3M sander. I love that thing, by the way. And you might be asking yourself why I was doing all of this on my CNC table. And the reality of it is I'm a garage shop and I literally just ran out of table space. And this was the only place that I had left to do it. And I'm doing this first sanding because I'm going to be doing another pour. So if you count them up, we've done 3 pours already, and we still got 2 more to go. And one is to fill in any low spots, and the other one is going to be to fill in those runes around the Cthulhu. I'm getting into my own with all these multi-layers and multi-textures within the table, and one more element that we can add right away to this is some burning. So I'm burning around all the runes. I called the owner and I wanted to put in some lime green, like glow in the dark epoxy. And I didn't know how well that would fly. Normally I wouldn't even ask this question, but I had to this time around because it was such kind of an outlandish ask. I thought it would look really cool, but I didn't want to do it without running it past the buyer. And burning it was just going to make it pop out a little bit more. So I ordered this lit pigment, and it didn't come in for like a month. So I ordered it about a week before I needed it, and still not getting it for a month. We really just ended up putting the Cthulhu table on hold for a whole month, just waiting for this pigment to come in. Bad planning on my part for sure, but Stuart Sempe just kept telling me, yeah, it's coming, and they never sent it either. I'm totally fine if vendors make mistakes and their shipments are late or whatever, but just tell me, don't like keep it a secret. Shouldn't be a secret. I shouldn't find out 3 weeks into it that you guys had a problem with your suppliers. So for me, I'm very upfront. It takes as long as it takes. I will have delays in suppliers. I will do that, and I'm not going to promise anybody a time. And I let them know that. I'm booked out a year currently, and I tell people, yeah, I'll probably be able to start in a year, but I don't know what it's going to take to get that table finished. And God bless the people that buy from me, because I am a terrible person to buy from, and I'm booked out a year, and I don't let you make too many decisions on the table, and I'm kind of overrule you if I don't like it, and I don't know how you guys put up with me. I do appreciate it so much. I have no idea how I got this many followers and this many customers. I really do appreciate it. I feel the love every day. For as pissed off as I got with the delay, I do still have to say that the product itself is pretty spectacular. That lit pigment glows with heat or light. Oh wow, I forgot the dizzy table spin effect here. So this is my clamp camera, and it worked fantastic except for when I went to go use the buffer. And then during the live, one of the people watching was like, is this what it's like to have an aneurysm? And I have a voice that talks to me while I'm doing the live, so I can hear what everybody is typing. And I heard that, and I'm like, what is, what's going on with it? And I look at the video, and it's just like, it is the weirdest shake that was going on with the camera when we were doing the buffing there. Here, I'm just applying some CA glue, filling in the last little pits. There was a ton of punky wood on this build. As you can imagine, with anything that's rotted and has a lot of termite damage, there is a lot of backfill with a CA glue and with the epoxy, and we just kept going back and back and back on it. And at the end of the day, it all ends up being worth it, but it really is a ton of work. Here I'm just backfilling some of the problem areas on the bottom of the table, and on the edge there you could see I have a little bit of the aluminum tape. And I pour it all in, and I use the aluminum tape when I'm going to use the torch, because any other tape kind of has a problem with it. The Paper tape melts. Oh, look at that. And the plastic tape will shrink and you will get a leak all over the side wherever you're trying to go into it. And there's that pigment again. It did turn out great. Here we're pouring an octopus. And I bought this off of Etsy, I think. And so with all intent to break his head off and shove him into the table. So we're all the way to wet sanding, and we start at 350 and wet sand all the way up to 2000 grit. And then we go with the 3M heavy and polish the table up with the 3M machine polish. So after we do that, we spray it all out with a water bottle, and that just gets out all the little schmutz that was left over, because all of the polish wants to go in the grain of the wood, and that's really the only way that I found to get it out. I will say this, don't let it sit overnight. I learned that the hard way. If you're going to polish, you need to go back that day and spray it all out. I am going to try to use a pressure washer to do it, because it is a ton of work to do with a hand spray bottle. I've been kind of apprehensive to do that because I don't want to push water into the table. But we're going to try it on a scrap piece of wood, check it with a moisture meter afterward to see if we did push water into it. If we did, we'll stay with the spray bottle, because I know on the flat grain with the spray bottle, there really isn't much of a change in the moisture content when we do that. Now, I wouldn't do that on a burl at all, because I feel like a burl will absorb the water more, the same as I would not do it on end grain either. And this has always been the intended purpose of our cup holders, is to put some octopus legs coming out of them. We just backfilled that with some epoxy, but before we can show what that looks like, we have to put on some legs. And I got these pie looking legs from Flowy Line, and they really were wrapped well. That's what I can tell you. So I unwrapped these and I kept them in my shop, and then I sent the buyer another set from Flowy Line. And I thought maybe it was just me that took so long to unwrap them, but he was like, it literally took me longer to unwrap the legs than it took me to put them on. And so good job on you guys, Flowy Line. Good way to wrap your packages well and protect your products. However, I would appreciate if you stop using my videos without compensating me for it. That would be fantastic. The one thing that I did wish for these legs was that the slots were a little bit bigger, because these bolts that I'm using are relatively small, but they're almost too big for these Flowy Line legs. I probably could get some smaller inserts and have an easier go at it. But I mean, they're just about the right size. They're still slotted, so it leaves room for the wood to expand. But I wish they were a little bit bigger. And here I use a very scientific method of counting to 7 Mississippis before I try to insert the insert into the table where there's epoxy. And so the idea is you heat it up and it kind of melts through the epoxy a little bit, as opposed to using the wood glue like I do on the other inserts. And if you think, like there's no way I'll do it again, you're right until you are wrong, because I got it in and then knocked it out. And trust me, it takes like every bit of restraint in my body not to reach out and burn my hand on those, because really you just want to reach out and grab it. So after you get it all in, the hope is that all the bolts go in like smooth like butter. And here, one of them didn't, because I misaligned one of the holes. And if you go back and watch the video, you can actually watch the leg slide out of place when I was tapping it in. So it's pretty obvious where I made the mistake. So I cleaned it up real quick, redid the insert, and then we put our first layer of Rubio Monocoat on the bottom of the table. And that's not bad looking by itself, right? Totally not bad looking. Totally, that would have been something I would have sold the first year I was making tables. You'll notice I do not recess my legs, and that is because I don't expect that many of my customers climb around under the tables. Now, I know that's like the thing to do now, and they think it looks better. But I can tell you right now, I'm sitting at the puzzle table, which I made, and I have never once noticed that the legs are not recessed. And I walk to it from 35 feet away when I walk in the room. There is no way to tell. I mean, I could, for a coffee table too, maybe you want to improve your dog's view. I'm not sure why. Here we go. We got a nice thick layer of Rubio Monocoat on it. I don't put it on the clear, but I'm not necessarily trying to avoid putting it on the clear epoxy. There's no need to put it on there because it's just kind of a waste of Rubio. And Rubio is super expensive, but I don't think it will be for long because they're getting a lot of competition out there. They're going to have to lower their prices if they want to stay competitive in the market because a lot of the products are very similar and have very similar results. And that brings me to nano coating because with the nano coating at the end, the finish ends up being almost identical to the cheaper stuff. So my next purchase will be a linseed based oil, but it probably will not be Rubio anymore. The game changed a little bit, and Rubio did not do a whole lot for those of us that were pushing their product because it was the best. And now, unfortunately, with these nano coats, it's not the best. Here's our finished product. I absolutely loved this table. If my wife would have let me put it in my office, I definitely would have. I probably would have stolen it, but the buyers are really happy with it. Tell me what you guys think. Give me a like, share, subscribe. Do all that stuff if you like what I did. If you don't, leave me a comment and tell me how terrible I am. Either way, get weird with wood.